Hamilton finally won in Ferrari red. And minutes later, the internet tried to turn it into an investigation. Mercedes had pole position. Mercedes had the championship leader. Mercedes had control of the race, until Ferrari made one perfectly timed call under the virtual safety car, and everything collapsed. Hamilton took the win. Antonelli retired on lap 62. Mercedes lost a massive point swing. Ferrari suddenly looked alive again. But here is the twist. The real danger may not be Ferrari's strategy. Because while everyone is asking whether Hamilton's Barcelona win is under review, the verified pressure is actually surrounding Mercedes, their car, and the questions Ferrari had already pushed toward the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. So if Hamilton is not the one in trouble, why does this victory feel like the race that could expose everything? Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this hook matters, you have to look at what Mercedes thought they had before the race even began. They had the perfect platform. George Russell was on pole position. Kimi Antonelli, the championship leader, was right there near the front. Mercedes had been the team shaping the season, the team others were measuring themselves against, the team that seemed to have answers before anyone else even understood the question. Ferrari did not have that luxury. Ferrari had pressure. Hamilton had arrived in red carrying one of the biggest expectations in modern Formula One. Every race without a win made the move look heavier. Every missed chance made the doubts louder. Every Mercedes victory made people ask the same uncomfortable question. Had Hamilton left too late? That is why Barcelona was never just another Grand Prix. It was a test of belief. For Mercedes, it was a race to control. For Ferrari, it was a race to steal. And stealing a race from Mercedes required more than speed. It required patience, risk, and the kind of strategic courage that can make a team look brilliant or foolish, with no middle ground. That is why Ferrari's decision to start Hamilton on soft tires was so important. Soft tires are fast, but they do not give you comfort. They give you opportunity, and then they start asking for a price. Push too hard, and the grip disappears. Wait too long, and the faster plan becomes useless. It was a gamble with a sharp edge. Mercedes could look at that choice and think Ferrari had trapped itself. Hamilton would be quick early, but vulnerable later. The more conservative Mercedes approach seemed safer, cleaner, easier to manage. But Ferrari was not trying to run the same race as Mercedes. That was the point. Ferrari needed the race to bend. They needed something to interrupt the normal pattern. A moment where the pit lane became less costly. A moment where timing mattered more than raw control. A moment where Hamilton's experience could turn a risky plan into a weapon. And this is where the first real clue appears. Ferrari was not reacting to panic. Ferrari was waiting for a door. The virtual safety car became that door. When Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin stopped on track, the race slowed. The field had to reduce speed. The gaps changed meaning. Suddenly, a pit stop could be taken with less damage than normal. For a casual fan, it is easy to miss how powerful that is. Imagine everyone in a busy hallway suddenly being told to walk slowly. If you need to step into another room and come back, you lose less ground than you would if everyone else was running. That is what Ferrari understood instantly. Hamilton came in. Fresh tires went on. And the race that Mercedes thought it was managing suddenly became a race Ferrari had been preparing for. That is why the investigation rumor became so powerful. The stop looked too perfect. It came at the exact moment Ferrari needed it. It gave Hamilton the grip to attack. It left Mercedes with the sickening feeling that the race had shifted before they could protect themselves. But perfection is not proof of wrongdoing. And that difference matters more than any headline. A smart strategy can feel suspicious when it destroys your plan. A legal call can feel unfair when it costs you victory. A rival can execute something so cleanly that people assume there must be more behind it. But the verified picture does not show Hamilton breaking the rules. It shows Ferrari taking a risk, waiting for the right moment, and using the race conditions better than Mercedes did. That is a very different story. And for Mercedes, it is a much more uncomfortable one. Because if Hamilton had won through something illegal, Mercedes would have a target. They could attack the result. They could push for punishment. They could turn defeat into a legal fight. But if Ferrari simply outsmarted them, then the questions turn inward. Why was Mercedes exposed? Why did Ferrari react first? Why did Hamilton, the driver Mercedes knew better than anyone, suddenly look so dangerous in a red car? That is the real tension of Barcelona. It was not just a Ferrari win. It was a Mercedes warning. Hamilton did not need Ferrari to dominate every lap. He needed one moment of trust, one decisive call, one opening that allowed him to turn tire grip into control. And once he had it, the race changed completely. That is what makes the championship impact so dangerous. Kimi Antonelli's retirement on lap 62 turned a painful Mercedes day into a damaging one. He was the championship leader. He was supposed to limit the loss. Even if Hamilton won, Antonelli could still leave Spain with a strong result and keep the title fight under control. Instead, his engine failed. The points vanished. Hamilton's victory became more than emotional. It became mathematical. It cut the championship gap in one afternoon and made Ferrari's challenge feel real for the first time in a way Mercedes could not dismiss. That is why Barcelona matters. Because it connected three things at once. Ferrari finally gave Hamilton a winning race. Mercedes lost control at the worst possible moment. And the wider questions around Mercedes' car were already sitting in the background, waiting to become louder. So when people ask whether Hamilton's win is under investigation, they are looking at the loudest version of the story. But not the deepest one. The deeper story is that Ferrari's victory gave the team something they did not have before. Leverage. Before winning, Ferrari's questions about Mercedes could sound like frustration. After winning, those same questions sound more dangerous. Ferrari can say they are not complaining because they cannot compete. They can compete, and they still want clarity. That is a powerful position. And it changes how every future race feels. Because now Mercedes is not only defending a championship lead. They are defending the idea that their advantage is secure. Hamilton's Barcelona win did not put him in confirmed trouble. It put pressure on everyone around him. And that is why the next part of the story becomes even more serious. Then the story moves from Ferrari's pit wall to the question that made the whole controversy explode. Was Hamilton's Barcelona win actually under investigation? Because that is the claim that spread the fastest. It had everything a Formula One scandal needs. A shocking winner. A beaten Mercedes team. A perfectly timed strategy. A governing body review. And the possibility that one of the most emotional Ferrari victories in years could be challenged after the flag. It sounds massive. It sounds like the result itself is hanging by a thread. But when you separate the noise from the facts, the picture changes completely. There is no confirmed evidence that Hamilton's race-winning strategy broke the rules. There is no confirmed proof that Mercedes filed a formal protest against Ferrari's virtual safety car call. And there is no verified indication that Hamilton is facing punishment for the way Ferrari won the race. That does not make the story boring. It makes it more revealing. Because the real tension is not whether Ferrari cheated. The real tension is why so many people believed, instantly, that this win had to be suspicious. And the answer is simple. It hurt Mercedes too much. Ferrari's call did not just help Hamilton. It destroyed the shape of Mercedes' race. It took a Grand Prix that Mercedes had every reason to believe it could control, and turned it into a Ferrari masterclass. It made pole position feel less powerful. It made track position feel fragile. It made a conservative plan look exposed. That is why the pit stop became the center of the storm. When a strategy works a little, people call it smart. When a strategy wins by force, people call it brilliant. But when a strategy flips an entire race against the strongest team, people start looking for shadows. The virtual safety car gave Ferrari a legal opportunity, but opportunity is only useful if the team is ready to take it. Ferrari was ready. Mercedes was not ready enough. And Hamilton, once given fresh tires at the right moment, turned the call into a race-winning weapon. That is where the rumor becomes emotionally believable, even without confirmed proof. Mercedes had been the benchmark. Mercedes had the young championship leader. Mercedes had Russell starting from pole. Mercedes had built the expectation that Spain would be another weekend where their structure, their pace, and their control would be too much for everyone else. Then Ferrari broke the pattern. And when a dominant pattern breaks, people want a reason. Sometimes the reason is illegal machinery. Sometimes the reason is a driver mistake. Sometimes the reason is bad luck. But sometimes, the reason is simply that another team saw the race more clearly. That is the uncomfortable version for Mercedes. Because you can protest a broken rule. You cannot protest being outthought. And this is where Hamilton becomes such a dangerous figure in the story. He was not just any Ferrari driver winning against Mercedes. He was the driver who helped define Mercedes' greatest era. He knew what a Mercedes operation felt like from the inside. He understood the level of precision that team expects. He understood how they think under pressure. So when Hamilton beat them with a Ferrari strategy, it carried extra weight. It felt personal, even if nobody said it that way. Because Formula One is never purely mechanical. It is human. It is memory. It is pride. It is the old champion returning in another color and reminding his former team that he still knows how to hurt them. That is why the reaction around the paddock would never be calm. Ferrari saw a breakthrough. Hamilton saw proof. Mercedes saw a threat. And everyone else saw weakness. But here is where the story becomes even deeper. While the public argument was being pulled toward Hamilton's strategy, the real regulatory pressure was already sitting somewhere else. Mercedes front wing. That is the part most people missed, and it matters more than the headline. Earlier in the 2026 season, Ferrari had raised questions about Mercedes' interpretation of the new aerodynamic rules. The concern centered on the Mercedes front wing, and whether its behavior could be exploiting a clever gray area. This was not about Hamilton's pit stop. This was not about Ferrari's Barcelona strategy. This was about the car Mercedes had used to build its advantage. And in Formula One, the front wing is not a small detail. It is the first piece of the car that cuts through the air. It shapes how the rest of the car behaves. If it changes even slightly at high speed, it can influence cornering, tire wear, balance, and straight-line performance. Imagine opening a door into a strong wind. Move the door a few inches, and the force changes immediately. Now imagine that idea on a Formula One car, where tiny changes can decide whether the driver has grip or slides wide. That is why rival teams watch front wings so closely. Because a front wing can look like one part, but it can affect everything. Ferrari did not need to accuse Mercedes publicly of cheating to create pressure. They could do something more precise. They could ask the governing body for clarification. They could force the rule makers to define the line more clearly. They could make sure Mercedes' interpretation was being watched. That is how political pressure works in Formula One. It does not always arrive as a dramatic protest. Sometimes it arrives as a question. A question that sounds technical. A question that sounds calm. A question that can make an entire rival garage uncomfortable. And once that question is active, every race result begins to carry extra meaning. If Mercedes wins, rivals ask whether the advantage is too clever. If Mercedes loses, rivals ask whether the advantage is fading. If Ferrari wins, Ferrari suddenly has more credibility when asking for answers. That is why Barcelona changed the mood. Before this race, Ferrari could be seen as the team chasing Mercedes and searching for ways to close the gap. After this race, Ferrari could say something far stronger. We beat you. And we still want clarity. That is a very different position. It means Ferrari is not only fighting with lap time. They are fighting with leverage. They are saying, we are fast enough to win, but we are also watching what makes you fast. For Mercedes, that is dangerous because it creates two battles at once. The sporting battle, where Hamilton is now a bigger championship threat, and the regulatory battle, where their technical advantage is under attention. Neither battle proves wrongdoing, but both create pressure. And pressure is where championships start to bend. A driver under pressure breaks a little earlier. A strategist under pressure doubts the obvious call. A team under pressure overprotects a result. An engineer under pressure has to explain not only why something is fast, but why it is legal. That is the world Mercedes suddenly faced after Barcelona. And it is why the so-called emergency review headline is so powerful, even if the direct Hamilton angle is not confirmed. Because the feeling of emergency is real. Not because Hamilton is about to lose the victory, but because Mercedes' comfortable season suddenly feels less comfortable. Antonelli's retirement made the points table more fragile. Russell's pole position did not become a win. Ferrari's strategy exposed a gap in Mercedes' race control. Hamilton's pace after the stop proved Ferrari had more than emotion. And the technical questions around Mercedes remained alive in the background. That combination is what made Barcelona explosive. Not one scandal. Several pressure points colliding at once. And that is why the next question becomes even more important. If the investigation story is not truly about Hamilton's strategy, then why did the paddock react as if something enormous had just happened? Because something did happen. Ferrari changed from hopeful to dangerous. Hamilton changed from symbolic signing to active title threat. Mercedes changed from untouchable leader to team under scrutiny. And the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile became the silent force sitting over the next chapter of the season. That is the real cliff edge. Not whether one pit stop was legal, but whether Barcelona was the first sign that the entire championship balance is moving.